Welcome back to the final edition of Down to the Wire. Here we are recapping the Stanley Cup Finals. But before we get to that, let me introduce my co-host, Nolan Thode. Again, thank you for joining me on Down to the Wire this season.
No, it's always great, Pags, and we've had a nice little thing going this year. Earlier in the Pagcast, we would have one or two off episodes here, just chatting, talking about hockey. But this year was nice for us to actually kind of have a specific segment where we could run down everything because I think you and I both are huge fans of the league.
Yeah, I know, and I agree. And I guess let's just get right to the news. We are not sure if we'll continue this next season, given that we're both off to university, and we don't know about our commitments there. I personally already have a commitment. I'm going to be the Carleton Ravens. Hat here. Carleton Ravens sports beat writer. So I'll be sharing my links to stories that I write covering hockey. Maybe I'll cover basketball. I'm definitely covering football. I'll try and sprinkle in basketball, but I'm not the most knowledgeable there. But we don't know if if Down to the Wire is going to continue next season. So on behalf of me, on behalf of Nolan, I just want to say thank you for him joining me. Thank you for everyone tuning in. Thank you, Zach Hogan, for his weekly power rankings of the North Division. Those were always fun to debate about. But yeah, I want to thank everyone before we started this episode.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on all that. I think it was just a great season, and we're both in grade 12, moving on to different paths, and things happen, people get busy, but it was great while it lasted. Smile that don't be sad that it's over. Smile that it happened.
Well, let's get right into our Stanley Cup final recap. And then at the end of our episode, we're going to do some offseason rumors that have been going on. So the Tampa Bay Lightning beat the Montreal Canadiens in 5 games. Tampa did win in 4-1. But I think this series kind of went the way that we expected it to go. Montreal's offense was never really there. They scored 5 goals I think 8 goals in 5 games. Andre Vasilevsky was never really tested. If you look at where the shots came from, their shot locations, it came from, outside the circles. I think Montreal had a hard time getting bodies in front of the net. I think that everyone's going to headline like the Drouin for Sergachev trade. Now we look back at it. Sergachev now has 2 cups. Drouin had to take the playoffs and, a bit of the regular season off due to his own personal reasons. And you just have to wonder what the Montreal Canadiens offense could have done if Drouin had played. I know that he struggled in the regular season, but maybe maybe knowing that it's playoffs, like, Justin Williams, for example, he's known as Mr. Game 7 specifically because he has the experience. He comes to play when it's a Game 7. So, with that being said, we don't know what Drouin could have done.
Yeah, I think Drouin, the skill, the talent, it's always been there. There's no questioning that Jonathan Drouin is is an NHL player just based off of his skill alone. And I think it would have been nice to see him in these playoffs. That's what I was thinking each and every round, that Montreal moved on, what would be happening if Drouin was with the team. And I think, especially in the Stanley Cup Finals against Tampa Bay Lightning, the team that kind of discredited him. They obviously traded him for Sergachev, so they got something out of him. But I think, it would have pushed him a little more against his former team and the guys that kind of gave up on him to, perform in the Stanley Cup Finals, especially for, his hometown. He's passionate playing for the Montreal Canadiens.
And another player that isn't really known. It's kind of the opposite now. We're going the opposite direction. But Thomas Tatar, he's known as a possession analytic god. That's all I see on Twitter. But like, if you look at his playoff stats, he's not really known as someone who comes to play in the playoffs. We look at Vegas when they made the playoffs, they scratched him. And the same thing happened with Montreal. So it seems as though Thomas Tatar's on his way out. Jonathan Drouin's on his way out. And like, as a Habs fan myself, this team is going to be memorable for many reasons. And the main reason that I think of, and actually I saw this on Twitter, is because with the pandemic going on and all the tough times that we've had, whether it's mentally, whether, you've had a family member pass away due to the coronavirus and you're a Habs fan. And, the Montreal Canadiens were always there for us. Hockey was always there for us to be an escape, and I think as a fan that brought us closer to the players in a sense. But it really sucks the way it ended and how, Montreal never really seemed to put up a fight. And had the Islanders win in game 7, I would, if I'm a betting man, I would have bet a lot of money saying that this, Islanders Habs series would have been a better, more competitive series than Tampa Bay and Montreal.
I have to agree with you right there. I think, obviously at the end of the season, we can look at this Tampa Bay team. They were the best team in the regular season. They didn't have Kucherov and they missed Stamkos for half of it, and they were still able to be third in that Central Division and, really close within it, not like they were just third place. And once the playoffs started, they kind of just proved that they were the best team in each and every round. And I think the cup was theirs. At the start of the playoffs, I felt like they were going to go back to back. It just really did feel like that. And had the Islanders been able to, defeat them in that game 7, they were that close. It was a 1-0 game. It would be a completely different cup final. And I think the matchup between Montreal and New York is much different than Tampa and Montreal.
And, one thing that I should mention is that, like, I thought, I don't really like Ducharme's player management. I think that's correct. We laugh at his decision to scratch Romanov. He plays 2 games prior to scoring his first Cup Finals goal. So that looked like a brilliant decision. And I think that if, Romanov and Kulak played the entire Stanley Cup Finals, it may have been differently because, in game 4 of the finals, Montreal, may not have played their best game, but looking at that bottom pairing of Romanov and Kulak, you could play them consistently. And I felt confident, I felt more confident in them playing rather than a Merrill and Gustafsson pairing. And, with Joel Bouchard leaving for Anaheim, I was so high on Bouchard. I'm not the biggest fan of Ducharme because he scratched Caufield and Kotkaniemi for, the first couple games of the playoffs. Caufield sat out 2, Kotkaniemi sat out 1, and then you see Kotkaniemi sit out another one. And, it's really disappointing to see, a 3rd overall pick, someone who you want to groom into a top centerman in the league, and he's not getting the chances.
Yeah, it's super strange for me. And his performance in the Stanley Cup Finals, say what you want about it, but I think, just what he did all playoffs definitely deserved a spot in the lineup no matter what happened. I think, Kotkaniemi brought to the ice what a lot of, Montreal's other forwards couldn't. And I think, we saw that in the Leaf series. He scored the game winner in game 6. And I think, early in that series too, when it looked like it was all Toronto, when they finally put Caufield and Kotkaniemi in the lineup, it seemed like everything shifted, and it was surprising to see them, go away from that when the young guys were reliable for them. And it's crazy how it took so long for Romanov to get into the lineup. And, when he did, he was an impact player. When I watched him, I thought he was one of the better players on Montreal's team.
And, let's go back to the bubble playoffs here, Montreal and Philadelphia, or even Montreal, Pittsburgh. When the young kids take control of the game, you're going to have success. I mean, look at Ottawa. They played a bunch of their rookies this year, and they had tremendous success near the end of the regular season, finishing 7-3-1 or something, astronomically different than what they did at the start of the season. So I think that the success factor comes when you play your young guns, and I'm not surprised that Montreal saw success when they started playing Caufield and Kotkaniemi and Suzuki. And, I'm very interested to see how this deep playoff run makes these players develop.
No, 100%. I think, even though they didn't win the cup, there's a lot to take away from this cup run for the young guys like Caufield, Suzuki, and, the rest of their careers are going to be built on, building on this and seeing how they can get back to the cup finals and potentially win it. Obviously, guys like Carey Price and Shea Weber aren't going to be there when, the team is ready to go down and compete again, unless there's another incredible cup run from them in the next, 4 or 5 years. But I think, the experience that they take away from this is mighty important. And, Ducharme in his styles a little bit, maybe he relies on the veteran and just kind of trusts him a little more. But I do think, there's nothing wrong with just letting the young guys play. And as you mentioned with Ottawa, at the end of the regular season, things seem to be clicking, and they're going to be an exciting team coming into next season.
And I think that uh one play that was really series changing was the Blake Coleman goal. We go back to game two. It's at the end of the second period. You're tied 1-1, and all you have to do, whether it's Deneau not chipping the puck in deep or Sherratt stepping up on the bouncing puck on Goudreau, all you had to do was just play a little bit defensive. And next thing you know, it's in the back of your net with a 0.5, with literally no time on the clock left. I felt as though that shifted the series in favor of Tampa, because you go into the intermission down or tied 1-1, and that's a completely different game than going down 2-1. And with the record being what it is, Montreal didn't have success this entire season being a comeback team.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that was a big turning point. The game one in the series kind of got out of the hands of Montreal, and Tampa, they won it pretty handily. I think it was a 5-1, the final score of game
5-1, yeah.
And then game two, it seemed like they started to bring it. They were outplaying Tampa, outworking them in the corners a little bit, and Carey Price was standing on top of his head, and you need that to win the game. And had they been able to squeak out that game two, and had it been a 1-1 series, heading back to Montreal with a series tied versus being down, 0-2, it's completely different. And I think that Coleman goal kind of drained the Montreal Canadiens, and we kind of didn't see the same Habs team from the first two periods that we did in the third.
And I think that, Carey Price wasn't, himself, although the Canadians didn't play, terrific in front of him. The standard he set for the first three rounds, it just didn't, it seemed to me watching the game like he would save shots, or he would let in goals that he would have normally saved. I mean, look at game three and Victor Hedman's shot from the point. Like, I think that power play goal would have been saved if it was in the Toronto, Winnipeg, or Vegas series.
No, I agree. Carey Price had an incredible playoff run, but there's only so far you can go with your goalie carrying you. The team actually needs to, win some games. And I think to this point, Carey Price is the sole reason that, Montreal even made it this far. So to discredit anything that he did up to this point just because of his cup final performance, I gotta just disagree with, anybody who thinks that way.
And then let's get into the we had some post game celebration, whether it's Nikita Kucherov's comments about the Montreal Canadiens fan base, or John Cooper's comments about just standing there and chewing gum. Like, I thought that was a legendary quote in itself. But a lot of Kucherov took a lot of heat for his comments saying like, oh yeah, look at the Canadiens fans. They celebrated game 4 like they won the final. I don't want to go back to Montreal. But I think that the NHL, and I thought like at first I was enraged. I was like, oh man, look at this classless player. But then I like, all right, so decompress, take it from a different point of view. And from the entertainment perspective, that's cash money. I mean, look, Kucherov just signed a deal with Bud Light. So I think that with the NHL, they need to get rid of the suit and tie thing, your dress code, and let the NHL be more like the NBA. Show off your personality. Fashion nowadays or clothing nowadays is such a big statement for players to show off their personality. It's not as though you need to show it off in a press conference.
No, I agree. And I think, the NHL, one way they can completely market, their league is with these, rivalries, with these press conferences. And now that ESPN is about to take over, I feel like they're going to take these sound bites and, blow them up, put them all over their socials, and, kind of force feed the NHL down people's throats. And I think that's a good thing, just because, expanding the game, a huge place to start and build on is, rivalries within the league. If it's a new league and there's not really many rivalries, it's hard to market it. But the NHL has been around for, a very long time, and there's some heated rivalries. And I think, they got to capitalize on that. And I agree with your point as well. Just in terms of the dress code, I think everything needs to be a little more relaxed. And I feel like, especially with this ESPN deal, we could be seeing, a different age of the NHL. And I'm excited to see, what comes from it.
Okay, that was just my dog moving up rapidly. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. But I guess one last point here on the finals. Although it was interdivisional, it was fun seeing Montreal play against Tampa in over a year, or Montreal playing against Vegas in over a year. And I'm very happy to get back to the 82 game regular season. I'm very excited to see what Cole Caufield can do, because obviously he's going to be a Calder nominee right off the bat.
No, I think so. And I think that's what you got to be looking forward to if you're a Canadians fan for next season. Cole Caulfield was, great in these playoffs. Say what you want about him. He looked fairly comfortable out on the ice, especially in the offensive zone. And if he's going to be put in successful opportunities on the top power play, playing with guys like, Toffoli, Anderson, Suzuki, I think, a good rookie season from him, especially in 82 games, I think, it's going to start to feel a lot more normal once we get back to 82. We haven't had 82 games since the 2018-2019 season. And I think, as fans of the league, we're just excited to see that normality finally, stick.
Well, let's get right back, or let's get into the rumors. I guess we should say, Viktor Arvidsson from Nashville got traded to Los Angeles. This came as kind of an odd trade, in my opinion, but the LA Kings acquired Arvidsson in exchange for a 2021 second round pick and a 2022 third round pick. The Kings should be in for a interesting offseason. There's a lot of rumors saying that Tarasenko is going to go to LA. There's a lot of rumors saying Eichel is going to go to LA. LA has a terrific farm system, and they can sell off a lot of their prospects if they want to go into a kind of mini win now, kind of window with Doughty and Quick kind of getting older by the season.
Yeah, I agree. I think this trade kind of is the, little teaser to what these off seasons could look like for both Nashville and LA. Nashville, it kind of came as a surprise, maybe for them not to ship off a piece, but especially Viktor Arvidsson. I thought, he's on a solid, team friendly contract, and he's kind of just been the heart and soul kind of guy on that team. So for him to leave for just a second and a third, I think it's a great trade for LA. They're getting a good guy in their locker room, and, they could start to, like you said, try to bring in more pieces. Tarasenko's on the trade block. They've got some money to spend in free agency as well. And then, you look at Nashville, is this, the first of the dominoes? Is, Viktor Arvidsson going to go? And then, Pekka Rinne retires, and then you trade guys like potentially Philip Forsberg on the market. Who goes to Seattle? I think we could be seeing a very different Nashville team comes the start of the next season.
And, I think speaking on that Seattle perspective and, kind of just the cap space you've been talking about, I think that the Tampa Bay Lightning, they're going to be the same impact team, but they're going to lose like impact players. Like I don't see Goudreau or Coleman or Pat Maroon resigning, but Tampa Bay is still going to be dominant. And I'm just interested to see how these different teams maneuver their way around Seattle, whether they do trades to keep players or whether they, let players walk. It's going to be, I think this offseason is going to be one of the more exciting off seasons in recent memory.
No, I have to agree with you with the expansion draft and just, all these rumors floating around on these big name players. I think it's going to be super interesting. And then you look at the Stanley Cup champions with Tampa, they've been able to, trade for some pretty good contracts. Blake Coleman and Barclay Goudreau were on some pretty good contracts. And people forget Tampa Bay did have to give up a lot of assets. Barclay Goudreau was traded for a first round pick. So, they're not going to have those guys, and they're going to still have the core of, Stamkos, Kucherov, Point, Hedman, Vasilevsky, and guys like that. But, it's going to be exciting to see what kind of team they can put around them after they, lose some of their $18 million in cap space.
Seth Jones to the Philadelphia Flyers is reportedly a no-go for right now. There have been rumors swirling around Seth Jones's availability to Columbus. He's let them know that he's not going to play for them next season. And, Columbus, he has 1 year left, but Columbus is trying their hardest to move that contract before next season starts. Philadelphia is one of those teams where they, it just came out yesterday, I think, that Jacob Voracek is going to be exposed and they're going to look for a trade. So maybe Voracek would have been in that trade for Seth Jones, like salary cap wise, maybe, I don't know. But, in the early goings of the Seth Jones trade saga, Philadelphia was a heavily rumored team that he was going to go to.
Yeah, I think it sucks for Columbus because Seth Jones already coming out publicly saying that he doesn't want to re-sign in Columbus makes a lot of GMs think, all right, well, he's going to be in free agency next year. And, the longer and longer they take to not trade him, I feel like the lower his value gets, because those GMs just think, they'll trust the fact that they can approach him in free agency. However, right now he's still got a year left. You're going to get that year out of him and potentially have a year to rework a contract. I feel like his trade value is as high as it's going to be right now. And, it sucks for them not being able to get that Philly deal. And I feel like, he would have been a nice fit in Philadelphia, would have been able to log a lot of big minutes and play, whether it be alongside Provorov or someone else like that. But I feel like, Philadelphia has a small window currently, just with, the declining of, Giroux and guys like that. So it'll be interesting to see, how they build moving forward and, what they choose to do. Voracek potentially leaving, I feel like is a big blow, just because he's been such a part of their team over the last 10 years.
And as we move on with the rumors, Darren Dreger reported that the Toronto Maple Leafs have interest in Taylor Hall. It seems as though that Zach Hyman is not going to re-sign with the Maple Leafs. So maybe they'll use that money they can save with Hyman leaving and spend it on Hall and Freddie Anderson. With the goaltending situation in Toronto, I think they have to re-sign Anderson. It's a crazy, out of this world thought to believe that Jack Campbell is going to have the same season he did this year, and replicate it for next season. I think that's just out of this world, and won't happen.
Yeah, over 82 games, we've never seen Jack Campbell be that starter. In this 56 game season, he was incredible, and all the credit goes to him. But you can't just be predicting that it's going to stay that way. And I think the Leafs definitely need to address the goaltending situation and have another 1A 1B guy to play with him. And Freddie didn't have a great season, so potentially that could lead to him taking more of a team friendly, less money kind of deal. And I think that would be good for both sides. And touching on Taylor Hall, the interest with him, I think that's probably not what the Leafs need to be looking at. I feel like they have a decently solid core right now, and I feel like building more within the depth rather than up front. Taylor Hall is just another guy who can play super well, but how responsible is he defensively? And losing Hyman as well is going to be a big blow, just because he's one of those guys that does everything for the Leafs. So losing him is going to be pretty bad.
Corey Perry said in his end of season media availability that he is open to a return with the Montreal Canadiens, stating that he wants to feel the real atmosphere of what Montreal means to the city, what Montreal means to different players. And I would love to have Corey Perry back on the team. If he signs for 750 or even 900K, he is certainly worth it for what he brought in the regular season. And a lot of people kind of forget that even with Alex Nedeljkovic was on waivers at one point during the season, and Corey Perry, I think, was on waivers and then on the taxi squad. And once Corey Perry solidified himself within the Habs lineup, he wasn't taken out.
Yeah, I think Corey Perry would be a big piece to bring back for the Canadiens. Not only was he a huge part of this cup run, but just a good leader in the locker room. Say what you want about his on ice antics, I just feel like he's a guy to look up to, and with a budding young core, that's a kind of guy you want in the locker room, leading the way for him. And he's going to come pretty cheap. He's been signing 1-year deals since he got bought out, I believe, by Anaheim. I don't know if Anaheim bought him out or traded him, but he's just going to be, signing these 1-year deals until, he eventually retires. But I think, him being in Montreal next season is, definitely a real possibility.
And we talk about veterans, and Duncan Keith has been in rumors with the Edmonton Oilers because, I guess a couple weeks ago, it was reported that he wants to stay in Western Canada with his family. But the Oilers don't make that much sense to me because they have Bouchard coming up. They have William Lagesson coming up. They already have they have Nurse Bear Larson there. I just don't see the fit between Duncan Keith and how, he hasn't really been his, the old himself. He's aging. He hasn't been really good these past couple years. And I just don't see how Keith can improve the Oilers.
No, I have to agree with you there. And I think, in my head as an Oilers fan, the only thing that really makes sense is in a trade that potentially can move some cap, just, teams looking to move maybe a bad contract. And Duncan Keith, when he first signed that contract was absolutely worth it. But, he's just not the same Duncan Keith anymore. Potentially, if the Oilers could unload like a James Neal or a Mikko Koskinen to Chicago, then I could see, reason for this trade being there. But, like you said, with the Oilers defensive depth, I just don't know where Duncan Keith, I don't know how he makes this team that much better, especially if we're giving up assets. It was reportedly, Stan Bowman was asking for an Ethan Bear or Ryan McLeod kind of piece. And those are just, two really important parts of the Oilers young core. So, if, Ken Holland does pull the trigger on something, I'm going to be super scared to see what the Oilers return is.
And the final thing we're going to talk about that we need to address is the whole controversy with the Chicago Blackhawks. It just came out a couple of days ago that they are, in motion to dismiss lawsuit sexual allegations made against their former video coach, Brad Aldrich, back in 2013, I believe. And the whole situation is that it was it was either 2010 or 2013, mistake me if I'm wrong, but Brad Aldrich was giving, sexual favors to players or something like that. And, it was during one of their cup runs, and now there's allegations coming out because a victim came out and spoke out against him. But the Blackhawks front office knew that this was going on, but didn't report it to the police. So that's why they're in, murky waters right now. And it's certainly not a good situation.
No, I have to agree with you. And, last year there was kind of a renaissance. I feel like, once Mike Babcock got fired, I feel like a lot of stuff started to come out, and, these coaches started to get exposed for, their ways and things that they had done. The Calgary coach lost his job last year, a couple of assistant coaches here or there. I think it's just crazy that, something like this can just, be slid under the rug for so long. And, when it does resurface, it's not blown up to the point where it needs to be. I feel like, in the current age, 2021, I'm surprised that, people aren't making a bigger deal of this, just because, there's absolutely no room for, stuff like this in any kind of locker room, whether, be in a sports locker room or, be in the workplace. I just think, it's a part of, the world that, that shouldn't exist. And when it does, we should bring it to the forefront and, hold people accountable for their actions.
And it's just weird to me that going off your point on just the whole coverage of it, there's only a handful of reporters. Because I look, you go to my Twitter account, my main Twitter account, and I follow over 1,000, reporters, whether that's baseball, NFL, or hockey. And there's only a handful of reporters doing coverage on this. And I find that quite embarrassing and quite, sad that it's not at the forefront of this issue, and we need to bring this to light. And Katie Strang of The Athletic, I think that's how you pronounce her last name, she asked Mark Bergevin during one of his press conferences, I think it was before the playoffs, I'm not too sure, but she asked if Berge knew of the incidents. And Bergevin was implemented, was in the Blackhawks organization when this did happen. And Bergevin did say that he had no recollection of memory, whether that's to cover himself up, whether that's to, save someone else. I don't know. But I find it very disgusting that Stan Bowman is going to make draft picks in the coming weeks. He's going to announce his list. It just, everything right now is so odd and terrifying and just brutal. Like, you don't want a workplace to have someone like Brad in it.
No, I agree. And, maybe you look at the current state of the NHL, it just went through the playoffs. So maybe there was, something to kind of distract, most of the hockey world. People were just focused on the playoffs more than this. But now that it's the off season, this is a development that I'm going to be keeping up with. And, I think you and I both are, in favor of just, holding this guy accountable. And, for it to just kind of saying that they're going to dismiss anything is really discouraging to me. And just victims all around the world who have to deal with this kind of stuff. I feel like, maybe it's just one minor victory holding him accountable, but it's a victory for everyone who has to go through that, sort of thing.
Well, that concludes our last. I mean, unless if you have any final words about the Brad Eldrick situation, I certainly don't. Nope. Okay. Well, that concludes our last segment of Down to the Wire. Whether we continue this in university or not, I'd like to thank everyone that made this a fun ride, whether it's following the NHL, writing down notes, bringing you on, having Zach Hogan do his weekly power rankings. It certainly was a fun ride. So thank you again, Nolan, for joining me on Down to the Wire.
It's been a pleasure, Pags.